Bug types have gotten a lot better in recent generations, and yet they're still considered the weakest type in the game. And in Gen 3, it doesn't help that most Pokemon don't even get good moves most of the time, which means it's probably going to be really hard to use bugs to beat a Hardcore Nuzlocke, where any Pokemon that faints is boxed forever, I can't use items from the bag in battle, set mode is mandatory, I can of course only catch bug types, and I can't level past the next gym leader. I also decided to play Ruby instead of Sapphire, which means we'll have to deal with Team Magma for that extra bit of difficulty. It's so stuffy in this moving truck.
It must be tiring riding with our things in the moving truck.
That's it, Mom. I'm not a piece of furniture. I'm leaving.
Oh, hello. And you are?
Probably the most reasonable NPC in all of Pokemon since I, keep breaking and entering into their homes. Either way, we need to pick our starter Pokemon, and since none of them are bugs, I decided to just pick Trico, giving May Torchic for additional difficulty. However, the first Pokemon we're allowed to pick up is also here on Route 101, being Wurmple. With a naughty nature, I name him Swoop and move on over to Route 102. Here we can find Surskit, which is the entire reason I decided to play Ruby and Sapphire over Emerald. For some reason, you just can't get Surskit in Emerald, and even though its moveset is pretty much hot garbage in this generation, at least it gets Intimidate upon evolution. I name her Lakitu, and shortly after catching her, Swoop gets to level 7, evolving into a Cascoon. And this is a perfect place to bring up the Dupes clause. There are many iterations of the Dupes clause, sometimes not allowing Pokemon from the same evolution line to be caught. The way I normally play with Dupes clause is I do allow Pokemon of the same evolution line, they just can't be of the same species. For this reason, we are able to catch Silcoon, which I named Paratroopa, and it is going to come up a bit with Nincada later as well. Now, the one thing that's awesome about bug Pokemon is how early they evolve, which means we can get both a Dustox and a Beautifly before the first gym. Then before I challenge Roxanne, I decided to go to Route 116 to find a Nincada when... well, at least now we can use HMs in style, I guess. After a bit of additional searching, however, I do find what I'm looking for in a Nincada, which I name Bullet Bill. This prepares us for our very first gym challenge versus Roxanne and her rock types, which is possibly the worst matchup in the game for our little bugs. For this exact reason, I had to resort to the least honorable strategy in all of Pokemon, evasion. However, this strategy is not foolproof, and the second turn I get hit almost down below half by a Rock Tomb. The very next turn, our Rock Throw connects, taking me down to just 14 HP, which is going to activate my Oran Berry, taking me back up to 24. Roxanne's Geodude is then seemingly bored of hitting through my accuracy drops as it just starts to set up with Defense Curl, which does allow me to get up all of my sand attacks. Once I've gotten the Geodude to -6 accuracy, I swap out of Bullet Bill into Swoop, and the plan here is to try and get Swoop to +6 with Harden while dodging as many Rock Tombs as possible. And initially, this goes perfectly well. I set up my Hardens as the Geodude keeps missing Rock Tombs, and this is a great time to bring up the fact that evasion strats are never something I recommend in a Nuzlocke. If you're forced to rely on luck to beat an opponent in a Nuzlocke, you really want that fight to be as early in the game as possible so that it's not a huge sunk cost if you lose that fight. Because minimizing the chance that something could go wrong in your run is pretty much the entire skill of Nuzlocking. After the Geodude takes me down to about half HP, it's time to start attacking, and Confusion is doing pretty decent damage. Unfortunately, it looks like it's not going to be a 3-hit KO, however, this isn't the biggest deal since we want Roxanne to waste her potion since we're in a way better position versus this Geodude than the incoming Nose Pass. After hitting another Confusion, the Geodude does hit us down below half HP, which unfortunately does mean we're going to use up our Oran Berry before we face the Nose Pass. Roxanne of course has a second potion, but at least she wastes it on the Geodude, and as I use my next Confusion, I do manage to confuse the Geodude, and it hits itself in Confusion, which is perfect. Another Confusion takes it down to like 1 HP as the Geodude not only hits through Confusion, but also the accuracy drops, hitting us down below half health to 22 HP before we can take it out. Now to beat Nose Pass, we don't have any good moves to hit it with, so I use a Poison Sting and amazingly get a Poison on the first turn as it just sets up a Harden. A Confusion then does pretty decent damage, after which I get hit by a Rock Tomb that does 7 HP of damage, leaving me at 15, which means I can possibly take 2 more. I use another Confusion as the Nose Pass misses a Rock Throw despite not even having its accuracy dropped. Confusion chips away at Nose Pass's health as another Rock Tomb this time does 6 points of damage, and after the poison damage, I'm really hoping I can take it out with another confusion, which I end up doing, claiming the first gym badge without any deaths. And once again, try and stay away from evasion strats as much as possible in your own runs, unless it's absolutely necessary, like in this fight right here. That hostage Pokemon turned out to be worthless. Dude, right in front of Pico's face? Shortly after saving Pico and using the best mode of transportation, we have to face Brawly, and if you've ever used a Dustox or a Beautifly in the Gen 3 games, you know that this went pretty swimmingly.
Even if a Pokemon faints and can't battle, it can still use a move it's learned from a hidden machine.
Come on, Weavile, use Rock Climb. Once defeating Brawly, the level cap is now 23, which means we can get Bullet Bill to level 20, evolving it into a Ninjask. However, this isn't the only thing this does for us, since if we have a spare space in our party and a spare Pokeball in our bag, we actually get Shedinja. I name it Boo, and while it may have some niche applications in the future, it won't be useful at all versus the next big fight of the run, May. Every single one of our Pokemon has a move that can defeat Shedinja, so it's gonna be up to our other 4 team members. And once again, you can see that I'm going against my own principles, using evasion strats, setting up a double team as the Wailmer goes for Growl. A second double team is going to cause the Wailmer to miss the quad effective rollout. Karmic Justice then strikes as I miss a Screech, but the Wailmer goes for Splash. The next turn, I do manage to hit my Screech, and what are you doing, May? For some reason, her AI thinks it's a better idea to go for a move that does literally nothing at all instead of a quad effective rollout. After getting hit by a Fury Swipes, the Wailmer does unfortunately miss though, and I take it out with a critical hit the following turn, sending in Combuskin. I manage to fire off a Screech, lowering its defense as it then misses an Ember. However, I then of course miss my Fury Swipes as it hits an Ember, taking me down to just 16 HP and getting a burn. For that reason, I have to swap to Swoop, which is really hard to say, and I get hit by an Ember, which does a little bit below half, which means I take another one on 3 HP and very fortunately don't get burned. I then get lucky and confuse the Combuskin with my Confusion, swapping out into Lakitu as the Combuskin hits itself in Confusion. It does massive damage because of the defense drop, and I can then take out the Combuskin with a Bubble. Honestly, if Combuskin didn't hit itself in Confusion there, or the next turn, I would have had to sack somebody. In all likelihood, it would have probably been Beautifly, since I'm not expecting this thing to do any wonders for the rest of the game. However, if I can avoid a death, I'm definitely going to take what I can get, and in this instance, Paratroop is going to be super useful in walling this Shroomish and being able to take it out with a couple of gusts. And I gotta say, I'm very glad to have this infamous rival fight behind me. That being said, we still have a very difficult gym fight ahead of us, before which we can go to Route 117, where I find myself an Illumise. And be honest with me in the comments, guys, does anybody like the design of Illumise? This thing just looks weird to me. The final bit of preparation we can do before challenging Watson is evolving Lakitu at level 22 into a Masquerain. Now, Watson is a formidable opponent, not quite as bad as he would be in Emerald, where he also has Manectric, but his Magnemite and Magneton are still really difficult to get past since we don't have any moves that aren't resisted. And right here, the first turn, you can see me go for a double team, and this is mostly just going to be to see how many Thunder Waves I can stall out. It's not entirely necessary, but I get very lucky dodging the first 2. I then go for a Screech, lowering the Magnemite's defense as it hits me with a Thunder Wave, which connects this time, but I do have the Cherry Berry to heal it off. I went for Screech since Fury Swipes is resisted and not a very powerful move, but the first time I do end up getting 5 hits, taking the Magnemite down pretty low, after which it does connect with another Thunder Wave, permanently paralyzing Bullet Bill. This is going to force out a Super Potion from Watson, as I can go for another Fury Swipes, this time not getting quite as many hits, but 3 still pretty good. The next turn I get paralyzed as the Magnemite misses a Sonic Boom. My following Fury Swipes unfortunately only gets 2 hits, leaving the Magnemite at about a 5th health. However, it once again misses its Sonic Boom, which is going to allow me to take it out with another Fury Swipes. Since both Watson's other Pokemon have super effective moves, he's going to send in his next Pokemon, Voltorb. And I do get paralyzed as he hits me with a Sonic Boom, even getting paralyzed the turn right afterwards as a Spark takes me down into the red. For this reason, I have to swap out into Swoop, who I've EV trained a bit in special defense, and Voltorb doesn't exactly have the greatest special attack to begin with. And on top of that, I can just heal off any damage that this thing does with Moonlight. I then want to try and put some damage on this thing, but seeing the Confusion only does about the same amount as a Spark's doing to me, I want to try and get a Poison with Poison Sting, but Voltorb starts going for Sonic Boom. It then goes goes for self-destruct when I'm below half, but it leaves me at 4 HP, which only leaves Watson's Magneton. And here's the thing, this Magneton can specifically only hit Shedinja with Thunder Wave and Supersonic, and Supersonic could lead to us hitting ourselves in confusion, which would be the end of Shedinja. So I of course devised a nefarious, albeit very time-consuming method to deal with this thing. Since Nabbit's already paralyzed, I decided to just swap back and forth between Boo and Nabbit, meaning that the Magneton is at least gonna go for Supersonic every other turn. And eventually, after about 40 whole turns of doing this, the Magneton was finally out of Supersonics. And while yes, this does mean that we've officially pretty much won this fight since the Magneton can't touch me, oh boy was it not the end of my time wasting. You see, after first getting Magneton to -6 defense with Screech, getting paralyzed in the process, I apparently had my fair share of hurdles to still get through. You see, after painstakingly getting the Magneton down into red health, of course Watson has yet another super potion, bringing it back almost all the way to full. Then after managing to hit through Fury Swipes' non-perfect accuracy, I get paralyzed, but not once, not twice, not even 3 times, but 4 in a row. It honestly just seems like lately I keep setting the record for the longest fight I've ever had in a Pokemon game, last time being against Oleana stalling out her Milotic, and this time stalling out this Magneton. What a way to get the 3rd badge. Hey, at least we get to put our shiny Zigzagoon to use. You know, I always thought it was cool that Fall Arbor had all these farms outside of it, since of course the soil would be extra fertile from the volcanic ash. I just think that's awesome subtle world building. And Fall Arbor is actually going to be one of the most useful locations for us since we can pick up the TM for Dig. Archie, your Poochyana's looking a bit stressed out there, bud. And speaking of reasons to be stressed out, I now have to take on Maxie. He starts out with Mightyena, which is going to intimidate Bullet Bill. However, at this stage, Bullet Bill has learned Swords Dance, so I can get back up to +1. The Mightyena then does about 30% to me with Bite, after which I go for a Leech Life, taking out about half of its health. It then hits me with a Sand Attack, which is annoying, but at this point, honestly, I kind of deserve it. Another Leech Life is enough to take out the Mightyena, also getting us back to full health. Next up is Camerupt, and if I were to miss this dig because of that Sand Attack, it would be absolutely devastating. However, after getting my speed boost, boosting up my speed 1 stage, a dig does connect, taking out the Camerupt in 1 hit. This leaves only Golbat, which is still a massive threat with its wing attack. And since I can't hit it with Dig or take it out with a not very effective Leech Life, I decide to swap out into Lakitu, getting that Intimidate, lowering its attack. I then go ahead and swap out into Paratroopa, who can tank a wing attack above half health, which means I'm able to tank another non-crit wing attack the next turn and go for a Stun Spore, paralyzing the Golbat. Paratroopa's Berry then activates and I go for a Morning Sun before swapping back into Lakitu to get yet another Intimidate drop. And I even get lucky on the switch as the Golbat gets paralyzed. However, now that Golbat's at -2 attack, I feel a little bit safer swapping in Swoop here. This means I am going to be able to go for a super effective Psybeam, which does end up getting a critical hit the first time around as I get hit by a wing attack. Another Psybeam is enough to take out Golbat's remaining health, which means that we beat Maxie without losing a single Pokemon, which is going to be absolutely crucial when we take on Flannery. Flannery's team uses incredibly powerful Fire-type moves in Overheat and Flamethrower, and to be able to get around this at all, I had to EV train most of my Pokemon in Special Defense as much as possible. This isn't that great though, since EVs are permanent in this game and I can't reset them with berries to train them in any different way. And so here we go, taking on Flannery the Fire-type trainer with my obviously inferior Bug types. I decide to lead out with Nabbit and go for Wish right away, since Nabbit is one of the Pokemon that I trained in Special Defense, which means that it's likely to survive an Overheat unless it gets a crit, which I do on just 12 HP. The next turn, I swap into Swoop to tank the second Overheat, which takes it down to just above half health as I then get the Wish. Remember, Overheat only has 5 PP, so if I can stall it out, this Slugma actually doesn't have any fire moves to be able to hit me with. Unfortunately, the Slugma does set up the Sunny Day as I go for Protect the next turn, and I then just waste the turn using Moonlight as it hits me with an Overheat, which does quite a lot because of the sun, but reduced damage because of its lowered special attack. I then dodge the 4th Overheat going for a Protect. I can then go for a Moonlight, which heals me all the way up to full because Moonlight heals you up more in the sun for some reason. I'm then hit by the 5th and final Overheat, which doesn't do that much damage since Slugma's at -6 special attack, after which I can heal up all that damage with a Moonlight. Now that the coast is is basically clear, I can freely swap out into Bullet Bill. The Slugma sets up the sun again on the switch, and the next turn I can go for a Swords Dance to start buffing up my attack. The Slugma misses its Smog, which means I can go for another Swords Dance the next turn, but this time the Slugma does connect with Smog, which is kind of a problem since that poisons me. In hindsight, I very much should have equipped Bullet Bill with a Pecha Berry here, which would have gotten me one less turn of poison. Because the poison ends up being really oppressive here since my best damaging move is Dig, which means that poison is gonna get 2 turns out of me for every time I use it. The bright side here is that Dig is gonna be able to one-hit knock out the Slugma at +6. This sends in Flannery's second Slugma, and at this stage, the poison damage is racked up so much that I'm below half health. Another Dig is of course gonna be able to take out this Slugma as well, but as Flannery sends in her Torkoal, the poison is really starting to rack up. Leaving me at 16 HP as I go for my final dig, it's looking like I'm probably going to be able to tank one more round of poison, and I do, leaving me at just 6 HP as I take out the Torkoal, granting me the 4th badge. That was close. Now that we have the 4th badge though, May gives us the Go Goggles, which means we can go to the desert and pick up the Claw Fossil. Taking this fossil to the fossil restoration guy in Rustboro City will allow us to get an Anorith. I named this little guy Bowser, and Battle Armor is a fantastic ability, which means we can always play around crits with this thing. Now let's talk about my father Norman for a second. He's got 2 slacking on his team, and while they look very lazy, they have the base stat total of your average box legendary. On top of that, all 3 of Norman's Pokemon have Feint Attack, which means we can't resort to any Shedinja strats whatsoever. So what exactly can we do to beat this behemoth of a Pokemon except abuse its most glaring weakness? The first turn I go for Protect, dodging the Slacking's Yawn. Then while it's loafing around, I go for a Poison Sting and do manage to pull off the poison. I think you guys can understand where this is going. Every other turn I go for Protect to dodge whatever move the Slacking's gonna throw at me, and every other turn I just go for an attacking move to get a bit more chip damage. Then on top of that, we're dealing a little bit of extra poison damage every single turn to make sure that we can take this Slacking out safely. The only real issue with my strategy is the fact that Protect only has 10 PP, and since we're whittling Slacking down so slowly, we're inevitably gonna run into Norman's Hyper Potion, healing it all the way back to full HP. And while my strategy did work in the end to take out 2 full health bars of this first Slacking, I was really unsure if I could take out another health bar with the PP I had left, let alone 2 if he uses another Hyper Potion. For this reason, I needed to start winging a backup strategy on the spot, so I send in Lakitu versus Vigoroth to lower its attack with Intimidate as it just goes for Facade. Seeing the pathetic damage of Facade, I decided to go for a Gust, but seeing the pathetic damage of my own, after going for a second Gust and realizing I was definitely at risk of a crit against that slash, I decide to send in Bowser. Bowser does resist all of the normal type moves, so I get hit by a Feint Attack and unfortunately miss my Rock Tomb. But then after getting hit by another Feint Attack, I do connect with my Rock Tomb, doing pretty decent damage and lowering the Vigoroth's speed. Expecting another Feint Attack, I can send in Swoop, who's got pretty epic special defense, and go for a Psybeam the next turn that does about half of Vigoroth's remaining health. I then recover up a bit of health with Moonlight, going for another Psybeam, which doesn't take out the Vigoroth. At this range, I do expect Norman to go for a Hyper Potion, so I take the turn to freely swap in Bullet Bill, as he of course heals up to full. I then go for a Swords Dance to boost my attack a bit, as I get hit by a Slash, which fortunately doesn't get a crit. A Slash of my own, however, does get a critical hit and knocks out the Vigoroth in one hit, sending in the final Slacking. And this is where my backup strategy really shines. I can go for Dig, dodging Slaking's attack, which means that the next turn when I hit it with Dig, it doesn't hit me because it's loafing around. For this reason, I just need to keep spamming Dig, and after a couple more hits, I can claim the 5th gym badge. Not exactly a spotless fight, but I think it really worked out in the end. Moving on to the Weather Institute.
You're so cute, you're disgusting. I'll put you down, kitty.
Excuse me, what? Now, as we approach Fortree City, we do have to challenge May again, but this time we're way better equipped, her team is kind of underwhelming, and the environment works in our favor since the rain powers down her fire-type moves. And for all those reasons, she's kind of a pushover this time around.
You should fly home and visit Little Root for a change. I bet your mom's worried about you, Axel.
Okay, she's about as worried about me as Grandma's old couch, so I think I'm gonna pass. And with that said, it's time to take on my childhood crush, Winona. Leading with Swellow, she decides to give me a taste of my own medicine, going for Double Team. Unfortunately for her though, I managed to break through even with a low accuracy move like Rock Tomb, taking her down deep into the red and lowering Swellow's speed. This is of course going to prompt her to use a Hyper Potion, after which I use Metal Claw to not take her down into the red again. Because of the previous Rock Tomb, her speed is now lower than mine, and I can take her out with a second Rock Tomb, sending in Pelipper. The Pelipper kind of threatens me with Water Gun here, so I can't stay in with Bowser, swapping into Lakitu, getting that Intimidate, powering down its Aerial Ace. It fortunately just goes for Protect on the switch, so I go ahead and swap into Nabbit, where it protects on the switch as well, giving me a free opportunity to use a Charm, as it then hits me with a -3 Aerial Ace. Another Charm gets it to -5 attack, as it confuses me with a Supersonic, which means it's time for Nabbit to swap out into Swoop. Dustox gets hit by a Water Gun, which doesn't do that much since I'm trained in Special Defense, and I start going for Poison Stings, trying to get that poison, but I'm not quite as lucky this time, getting the poison on the first try. Instead, it takes me a few times, but eventually I do get this thing poisoned. Once that's done, I can just Protect, Stall, and use Psybeam every other turn, and eventually the Pelipper falls to poison. This is going to send in one of Winona's 2 remaining Mega Threats, Altaria. And expecting it to either go for an Aerial Ace or an Earthquake, I decide to swap in Lakitu to get an Intimidate lower. The Aerial Ace still does quite a lot of damage, so I go ahead and swap in Nabbit, as the Altaria does what I feared and goes for a Dragon Dance, boosting both its attack and speed. The next turn, it uses another Dragon Dance, getting to +1, but I use Charm in response, getting it back to -1 again. However, this is good, since if Altaria uses Dragon Dance and I use Charm, that puts Altaria at a net -1 attack every single turn. Eventually wising up, she uses the special Dragon Breath, which paralyzes me, as I can go for a Final Wish. If I don't want to lose Nabbit here, I have to swap out going into Bowser, as Altaria uses Aerial Ace, which is incredibly nerfed at this stage. Since Bowser's pretty defensive, it's going to try and boost its attack up again with Dragon Dance, which gives me the perfect opportunity to use Rock Tomb, both lowering its speed, which isn't really making a dent in that boosted speed. The next turn, however, I get hit by a Dragon Breath, taking me down below half and paralyzing me, but by some miracle, I managed to hit my Rock Tomb, taking out the Altaria, leaving only her Skarmory. And this Skarmory is very bad news, so I immediately swap out of Bowser into Lakitu to lower its attack by 1 stage with Intimidate, as it hits me with the predictable Steel Wing. Then, expecting the Aerial Ace, I swap out into Swoop, and I realize immediately that I should have swapped out into Bowser, since Bowser can tank the Aerial Ace very well and then bait the Steel Wing, swapping back into Lakitu, which means I can get a second Intimidate drop. Now that the Skarmory's attack is effectively half because of its -2, I go ahead and swap into Paratroopa to take an Aerial Ace. The plan is then to get this Skarmory paralyzed to try and get as many free turns as possible against this thing, since we don't have any real good moves to damage it with. I do heal up to full health with a Morning Sun and try to do some damage with Paratroopa, but Mega Drain really isn't doing anything since it's quad resisted. I then go ahead and send in Bullet Bill since she's at full health, but even after a Swords Dance, because of a Sand attack, I just end up missing a bunch and do a pitiful amount of damage with a not very effective Slash. This encounter leaves Bullet Bill in the red, so I once again have to swap out into Swoop. And Swoop is technically in a pretty good position here. I can heal up with Moonlight and try to do a little bit of damage with Psybeam, maybe get a Confusion. And while that ends up working out for a few turns, Moonlight only has 5 PP, so I inevitably run out. This puts me in a really bad spot, since at this point Swoop has no way to regain HP, and of course Winona has another Hyper Potion to get all the way back to full. And so all I could do was do the best with what I had, which worked out pretty well actually. Psybeam was doing damage, I was hitting through Sand attacks, I even got a Confusion. However, this was a mission I was doomed to fail all the way from the start. It wasn't planned out well enough, and eventually, of course, the Skarmory breaks through and just takes out Swoop with a critical hit Aerial Ace. And as you can see, my team is not exactly looking too hot, with Paratroopa being the only member not at red HP. And unfortunately, Beautifly being of the same evolution line as Dustox, it kinda has the same problems in this matchup. While I could stall out the Skarmory with Morning Sun and doing a bit of chip damage with either Mega Drain or Gust, Morning Sun only has 5 PP, much like Moonlight. However, in the process of me just stalling this thing out, something beautiful happened. Skarmory ran out of Aerial Ace. I sat back for a second, I realized that I could just take this thing out with Shedinja since it now has no moves that can hit it, when I realized that Shedinja is safely tucked away in the box. I figured since every single Pokemon on Winona's team has Aerial Ace, it wouldn't be very useful to bring a Pokemon that just gets outsped and taken out by either one of them. But of course, the one time Shedinja's needed, it's off duty. Go figure. So I'm left here with Paratroopa since every other Pokemon on my team is paralyzed and or at red health, which means that Paratroopa's gonna have to stick it out till the end, and honestly, it was a pretty close fight, but in the end, Skarmory did get the best of Paratroopa, taking out both of the Wurmple evolutions. At this point, however, Paratroopa had at least gotten Skarmory way deep into the red, so Lakitu can come in and just finish it off with a bubble, granting us our 6th gym badge, but at the cost of a third of our team. Moving on, we can now get access to the Safari Zone, where we have 2 potential encounters, either Heracross or Pinsir. And since these encounters are location dependent in the Safari Zone, we can choose exactly which one we want, and I opt to go for Heracross. I do end up catching it, and with a gentle nature, Hammerbro here has the Guts ability, which is absolutely amazing. But Heracross isn't exactly amazing in the matchup versus the next gym versus Tate and Liza. So to prepare myself to take on the dynamic duo, I make sure to get Bowser to level 40, evolving it into an Armaldo. And so it's time to take on Tate and Liza. However, for this fight, since the level cap for Wallace is only 1 level higher, and we have to take on the entire Magma hideout after this, I decide to not go all the way up to level 42. Either way, I decide to lead with Solrock and Bowser, getting that Intimidate off as the Solrock then hits me with a Psychic that does a little bit below half, and the Lunatone goes for a Calm Mind. I then use Stun Spore with Lakitu on Lunatone to paralyze it, since I'm going to try and take out the Solrock first. Metal Claw ends up doing about 40%, and the next turn, Solrock begins by setting up a Sunny Day. I use another Stun Spore with Lakitu to paralyze the Solrock this time so that I'll outspeed with Bowser the next turn. However, I don't need to worry about that too much, since I do get a critical hit with Metal Claw, taking out the Solrock. Now that I only have to deal with Lunatone, it doesn't have a single move that can hit Shedinja, so I go for Protect on the switch with Bowser, as the Lunatone just sets up another Calm Mind. Since Bowser can't protect it this turn and is at the mercy of a Psychic, I decide to swap out into Nabbit, who's trained in Special Defense, but it turns out 1 Shadow Ball is enough to just take out the Lunatone, winning us the 7th badge.
The Rocket's lunch is imminent.
Buddy, you telling me this as a kid is the reason I have trust issues. Heading on through the underwater cave, we can find the TM for Earthquake, which I immediately teach to Heracross.
Hold it right there. F you, F you, F you, so it was you after all.
Bro, hold on. F me? F you! After that incredibly civilized discussion, it's time to take on Maxie for the final time. He leads with Mightyena, which is going to get an Intimidate off on Bullet Bill, but we're easily going to mitigate that with a Swords Dance right away, as the Mightyena goes for a takedown, which misses. After activating my Speed Boost ability, I then go for another Swords Dance as the Mightyena goes for a Scary Face to try and decrease my speed, which is pretty much futile since it increases every single turn anyway. I then go for a third Swords Dance and get Scary Faced again, but at the end of the turn, we get put back to neutral speed and keep gaining speed after that, so I can just one-shot both Mightyena and Camerupt with Dig and the Crobat with a Slash. What happened? What is this wretched scene? Dude, what do you mean? You wanted this. F you. Unfortunately, it falls to me and my bug types to deal with the rogue Groudon. And so I got to thinking, how would I defeat this behemoth of a Pokemon that sports fire-type moves that could annihilate my entire team? By running. I ran away from it. It was that simple. Defeating the legendary Pokemon left me with one final gym challenge versus Wallace. Now, unfortunately for Wallace, this is where Shedinja takes center stage. The only move he has that can actually hit Shedinja is Sweet Kiss, which I had a Person Berry for anyway, but he ends up just missing it, so I annihilate his entire team with Shadow Balls. D's spooky nuts, if you will. This incredibly free victory led me to Victory Road, where I of course run into Wally. Alright, Wally, let's get out of here. Wait, you're gonna stay here in the dark? Okay. Deciding which Pokemon to bring to the Elite Four can be one of the most important steps in a Nuzlocke, but in this case, I only have 6, so we're just gonna go with what we got. First off, we've got Bullet Bill with Dig, Swords Dance, Aerial Ace, and Baton Pass for some potential boost passing shenanigans. We then have Boo with Shadow Ball, Screech, Leech Life, and Toxic, who's mostly gonna try and capitalize on its immunities. Thirdly, we've got Lakitu with Water Pulse, Quick Attack, Silver Wind, and Stun Spore, and with that moveset, she's pretty much demoted to just being an Intimidator. Not that she was ever really anything different. Nabbit has gone from being a full support Pokemon with Encore Charm and Wish to having some extra utility with Thunderbolt from the Game Corner. Then there's the newest team member, Hammerbro, who I'm putting most of my faith in with Brick Break, Bulk Up, Earthquake, and Megahorn to deal some massive damage. Then finally we got Bowser with Metal Claw, Slash, Protect, and Ancient Power to act as our tank. And with that, it's time to take on the Elite Four, the first member being Sydney with his Dark types, which is inherently a terrible matchup versus our bugs. He does lead with a Mightyena, which is going to get an Intimidate off on Hammerbro. Regardless of the attack drop, I go for the Megahorn anyway, taking out the Mightyena in one hit with that amazing 120 base power. Sydney then sends in Shiftry, and he clearly has not taken my advice. As I go for a Bulk Up boosting my attack and defense, he decides to go for Double Team. Since the previous double team only got me back to neutral attack, I decided to go for another one, getting me up to +1 and +2 defense. Since I made sure to EV train my Heracross in both attack and speed before entering the Elite Four, I'm able to outspeed every single one of Sydney's Pokemon and of course one-shot them. That's one Elite Four member down, 3 to go. And unfortunately, the second Elite Four member we have to face is Phoebe, so yet another type that Shedinja can't really do anything about. And Phoebe was a little bit more difficult to plan for than Sydney since I didn't have any obvious super effective moves to go for, but in the end, I decided to just use Bullet Bill and set up a Swords Dance the first turn as I get hit by a Shadow Punch. I was kind of expecting the Dusclops to go for a Confuse Ray at some point here, which is why I equipped Bullet Bill with a Person Berry. However, I do get the chance to just go for a couple of Swords Dances, and because I got to set up completely unimpeded, not even having to use my Person Berry, I just sweep through her entire team with Aerial Aces. And I gotta say, before this run, I think I've underestimated Ninjask as a Pokemon. This thing is a monster. Now, the third Elite Four member we're gonna face is Glacia, and on paper, she has no moves that can hit Shedinja. However, every single Pokemon on her team has Hail, which would just one-shot us at the end of the turn. So for that reason, I once again lead with Hammer Bro, going for a bulk up the first turn as I expect the Glalie to set up the Hail. Now, in all honesty, we've had really good matchups against all these first 3 Elite Four members, so it's not really a surprise that Heracross can just go and sweep an Ice-type trainer. That being said, the fact that we now have to face Dragon types and Steel types is something I'm a lot more afraid of. And so, in taking on the Dragon Master Drake, I had to plan a little bit more carefully going into it. He leads off with a Shelgon, but not just any Shelgon, a Shelgon that loves going for Protect the first turn. Predicting this outcome, I decided to go for a bulk up, boosting my attack and defense in the process. I then attack the Shelgon with a +1 Mega Horn, which is of course going to be enough to take it out in one shot. So far things are pretty straightforward, and the same goes for Flygon, which because of my EVs I can outspeed, and because of the +1, take out in one shot as well, and the same goes for the second Flygon. Now in comes Salamence, and this is where things get interesting as it intimidates me as it switches in. Since I know I'll outspeed, I decide to stay in and go for Mega Horn since I'm expecting the Salamence to use the quad effective Fly. I then swap out into Bowser, who I've trained in defense, who can at least tank it neutrally. Dragon Claw is a special move doing pretty good damage, leaving me at just 40 HP as I go for an Ancient Power, and at that health it's enough to take out the Salamence. This just leaves Drake's final Pokemon Altaria, and fortunately for me, I have just the Pokemon to deal with this thing. For some reason, this Altaria has 0 Flying Stab, so it has no moves that can deal with Shedinja whatsoever, and since Drake can't switch out at this point, he's pretty hosed. And this time, it's not even that time consuming to take out my opponent with Shedinja, taking it out in just 2 Shadow Balls, thank goodness. With my entire team at my side after stomping the Elite Four, I had only one more challenge to face: the champion Steven. And my bug types are at a pretty serious disadvantage to his steel types, not to mention all the rock types on his team. Regardless, I start the fight with Nabbit going for a super effective Thunderbolt, which looks like it did a bit less than half as the Skarmory goes for a Toxic. I was expecting either Toxic or Spikes, but I'm happy with Toxic since I can heal it off with a Pecha Berry, and it means that we can actually use Shedinja. I then go for another Thunderbolt to get Skarmory down into the red, but it ends up getting a high roll, just taking the thing out, which I'm definitely happy with. Second out is Claydol, and since its only attacking move is Ancient Power, I decide to go for a Charm to lower its attack before I get hit by it, and it basically does no damage. I then hit it with another Charm as the Claydol decides to set up a Reflect. This perfectly sets me up to go for an Encore, effectively neutralizing this Claydol, which means I can swap out into Hammer Bro the next turn. Because of the Encore, the Claydol is just going to continuously go for Reflect, which gives me a great opportunity to set up some bulk ups, boosting my attack and defense. After the turn where I use my second bulk up, not only does the Encore wear off, but Reflect as well, which gives me the perfect opportunity to strike the next turn, and since my physical attack isn't halved anymore by Reflect, I can take it out with a single Mega Horn. Steven then sends in Armaldo, and despite my Heracross being at +2, a Brick Break isn't even enough to take it out, leaving it in the red as it goes for an Aerial Ace, which is quad effective, but I survive it because of my bulk ups. After Steven heals it up with a Full Restore, another Brick Break from Heracross is enough to take it into the red, which of course triggers Steven to use a second Full Restore. This time, however, as I attack with Brick Break after the Full Restore, I do manage to get a high roll, taking out the Armaldo in one hit. Steven then sends in his Metagross, which I could probably one-shot with a +2 Earthquake, but not wanting to take any chances, I just send in Boo because for some reason Steven's Metagross doesn't have an answer for Shedinja. This prompts him to switch his Cradily right into a Screech, as I then have to pivot out, swapping into Bowser, expecting an Ancient Power. I tank it fairly well, and the next turn I decide to go for a Protect, stalling the Cradily out of one more Ancient Power PP. Then to stall out the third ancient power, I decided to just sacrifice Nabbit, who I don't think I need anymore, but she actually survives on 31 HP, so I can swap back into Bowser, who's immune from crits with its battle armor ability, which ensures me that it's 100% gonna survive this ancient power. The following turn, I can just go for Protect, stalling out the final PP of ancient power. And now that the Cradily isn't a threat anymore, I go ahead and swap in Hammer Bro, as the Cradily goes for a Confuse Ray, but fortunately I was prepared for exactly this interaction with a Person Berry. After this, I can freely outspeed the Cradily, taking it out in one hit with a super effective Brick Break, and this actually means that I've effectively won the challenge. And while it's true that Steven still has a third of his team left in Metagross and Aggron, neither of these two has a move that can hit Shedinja. And so, while it was pretty quick to take out the Metagross with 3 Shadow Balls, the Aggron was a different story, where I had to run out of Shadow Balls, go for 3 Screeches, and then grind it out with Leech Life through 3 full restores. But eventually, after a very long time, in true Shedinja fashion, I did take out the Aggron, beating Steven, which means that I beat a Pokemon Ruby Hardcore Nuzlocke using only bug types. On top of that, I didn't even lose a single team member through the Elite Four and Champion, which is awesome. There were a few hiccups in this run, but overall, I think it went super well, and I'm very proud of this one. So guys, tell me what challenge you want to see next down in the comments below. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, what are you doing? Make sure to hit that button, and until we see each other next time, have a good one. Come on, we've just used the cut. We gotta go get the item. We gotta cut the tree, do the thing.